Do you feel unmotivated? Are you bored a lot? Are you easily distracted? Do simple tasks and chores seem overwhelming and you welcome any excuse to procrastinate, preferring to scroll through phone or stare at screen? Do you feel tired and weak, mentally and physically, like you just ate a really big meal and need to sit down or lay down for a while before you're able to really focus on the task at hand? And most importantly, do you get the sense that this state of mind and body is beyond your control, as if you'd been possessed or infected by some kind of laziness disease, and wish there was a straightforward and effective solution to this seemingly inescapable problem? Well, your wish has come true, because I'm here to give you all the answers and solutions needed to get you back up and motivated again in no time, trust me. And the craziest part about it is, even though what I'm about to tell you is 100% backed up by modern science, it isn't a new discovery at all. It is actually ancient wisdom, known and often considered sacred by various civilizations throughout space and time. Anyway, let's get started. Now, after I have just listed the symptoms, and before I provide you with the remedy, I must first diagnose the sickness. The first time I encountered the term acedia was in an essay by Aldous Huxley, author of the famous dystopian novel Brave New World. When I got my hands on a copy of his very first collection of essays called On the Margin, I stumbled across a fascinating chapter titled Acidity, which I will link in the description below. In it, Huxley begins by talking about the struggles faced by the Desert Fathers. You see, after Christianity was no longer persecuted in the Roman Empire, many devout Christians chose to go down to the Egyptian city Thebes, not to be confused with the Greek city-state of the same name, which was renowned for its army of men who really like each other, in order to live apart from the hustle and bustle of the big cities, and devote themselves entirely to God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit. There, those dedicated monks would often be assailed by demons, who would try to dissuade them from consistent spiritual practice by any means necessary, and tempt them to turn away from God. The most notorious of these was referred to as the noonday demon, or, alternatively, acedia, or acidy. The reason he is referred to as noonday demon, or Daimon Meridianus in Latin, is twofold. On the one hand, noon is the time of day when the sun is in its zenith, and in the desert the heat must be unbearable at that time, making every kind of action much more exhausting. The high temperature was a welcome excuse to procrastinate, to waver in your work, and to neglect the task at hand. The other reason is, of course, that around midday people have lunch, which is often the biggest meal of the day. Under the blazing sun, with a full stomach, you feel like doing anything at all will be too difficult. You are overcome with feelings of despair. You can hardly manage to move a single muscle, and because the sun appears to stand still, this moment appears endless, and you begin to feel hopeless. You feel every negative emotion at once. You feel exhaustion of mind and body, boredom, weakness, hopelessness, and despair. And as Huxley says, boredom, hopelessness, and despair have always existed, and have been felt as poignantly in the past as we feel them now. The physical and mental state of the monk in the desert, tempted by the noonday demon, is precisely what many today, including you who's currently watching this video perhaps, are suffering from and confronted with. Our problems are the same as they have always been. We can still all distinguish between what is productive and what is non-productive, or even counterproductive. And yet so many of us are still frequently led into temptation. So, what is the solution? Remember how I said the cause of these symptoms was that lots of food had just been consumed? That is the key. But before I give away my solution, and I promise I'll get there, let me expound on the importance of your gut for just a minute. The ancient Greek physician Hippocrates, known for creating the Hippocratic Oath, said that all disease begins in the gut. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most mentally healthy people to ever live, was also greatly inspired by Greek culture and said something along those lines as well. And thanks to modern science, this ancient wisdom seems to have been vindicated. Nowadays, the gut is frequently referred to as the second brain. Your gut and your brain, your body and your mind are connected. They are interdependent, and in order to maintain health in one, you must maintain health in the other. Don't believe me? Well, here's what the experts have to say.
We tend to think our brain makes these commands and then sends them down to the other organs, and then they all have to listen. But really, it's more that 10% of the nerves that connect brain and gut deliver information from the brain to the gut. Maybe more interestingly, 90% of the nervous fibers that connect gut and brain deliver information from our gut to our brain. And when you think about it a little bit, it does make sense because our brain is very isolated. It's in this bony skull surrounded by a thick skin, and it needs information to put together a feeling of how am I as a whole body doing. And the gut actually is possibly the most important advisor for the brain because it's our largest sensory organ, collecting information not only on the quality of our nutrients, but really also how are so many of our immune cells doing, or things like the hormones in our blood that it can sense. And it can package this information and send up to the brain, and it can there not reach areas like visual cortex or word formations. Otherwise, when we digest, we would see funny colors or we would make funny noises. No, but it can reach areas for things like morality, fear, or emotional processing, or areas for self-awareness. So it does make sense that when our body and our brain is putting together this feeling of how am I as a whole body doing, that the gut has something to contribute to this process.
So, to recap, your body is a temple. Your digestion is linked with your brain function, with your overall mental state. It is well known that our intestines busy themselves with digestion the most while we are asleep. We are distracted by our dreams, which most of us passively submit to, with no real mental activity. But that is not the case while we are awake. This means that if you feel lazy, unable to move or do anything, if you're bored, if you feel profound existential anguish and anxiety about the future and stuff like that, the best way to combat this condition of mind and body should be clear by now, given all the information. My solution is this: you must accelerate your digestion. Your goal should be to help your digestion along so that all your nutrients are extracted and everything that isn't nutritious is expelled from your body as fast as possible. In short, you must go to the bathroom at least twice a day. Turning this into my everyday routine has done wonders for my health. You may say, alright, the solution sounds simple enough, but it's easier said than done. Just how do I manage to add color to the ceramic multiple times a day? Well, there are 3 ways that I have found to be super effective. I discovered them more or less by accident, but I have incorporated them into this daily routine of mine, and now I can't imagine living any other way. And what's more, after some extensive reading, I learned that just like the ancient knowledge about digestion, these 3 ways too have been known for a long time, all over the world. Those killer apps, if you will, are the following: caffeine, tobacco, and alcohol.
Damn, Jimmy, this is some serious gourmet.
There are many kinds of caffeine that you can choose from, but in my experience, the most effective one is coffee. Not only is coffee a great stimulant to make you more active, it also stimulates your intestines. Once I started drinking coffee, I quickly noticed that it had this effect on me. For a while I was often late to school, because right before I was ready to leave home and go to school, I realized I couldn't keep things inside any longer. And although I found this out by myself, it has been known for a long time as traditionally transmitted wisdom, especially in Islam. In the 15th century, Sufi monks in Yemen used coffee in order to be more focused during prayer. In 1587, Abd al-Qadir al-Jaziri wrote one giant book about the history of coffee. Among other things, he mentions that the Mufti of Aden, Sheikh Jamal al-Din al-Dabani, was one of the first people to use coffee. Unfortunately, the book doesn't say anything about digestion, but in another book called The Middle Eastern Histories, written by Khadib al-Fakeli, we can read that the Emir Khalid al-Farabi of the very short-lived Khayyaliyun Empire metaphysically associated coffee with digested food, and was in fact convinced that ideally, both would be of the same consistency. Sadly, he died of a heart attack at the age of 43 and couldn't explore this notion any further. His very dehydrated body is rumored to be hidden in the Alborz mountain range to this day. So, if you're feeling down, coffee should without a question be your first go-to. However, it will make it difficult to get a good night's sleep if consumed too late, and that would obviously defeat the whole purpose of accelerating digestion. That's why I have another solution for you that you can rely on at any time of the day, and which furthermore can greatly enhance the effect of coffee when consumed simultaneously. Back when I was in high school, we had one of those long weekends. I spent the entire time blazing the green stuff pretty much hourly with two friends of mine. We ate lots of pizza, Cheetos, Doritos, and Fritos. Because of the munchies, I kept eating and eating even though I knew I was already full. After 2 days of this, my tummy began to hurt. I realized that all this time I never took the brownies out of the oven even once. Yet even after sitting on the loo for 20 minutes, clenching and unclenching my sphincter, nothing would come out. When I moved my hand across my belly, I felt as though I was carrying a rock baby. On the morning of the last day before school, my friend at whose house we were staying made us some coffee. I had hoped that that would do it. But after being unsuccessful in my friend's restroom yet again, I joined my friends outside once more and we smoked a few cigarettes. And lo and behold! No longer was there a rock inside me, but rather a kind of alien. Everything moved. My intestines were like intertwined serpents, writhing around, begging to be flushed out of my system. All I could say was, "I'll be back in a few minutes," and upstairs I ran just in time to sit down on the toilet before the fluid brown demon left my body voluntarily and with great speed. Ever since that day, I do not drink coffee without also smoking some tobacco. And once again, I eventually learned that other cultures had already figured this out long ago. The first uses of tobacco for ceremonial, ritualistic, and digestive purposes are to be found, of course, in the Americas. Some cultivation sites of tobacco have been found in Mexico dating all the way to 1400 to 1000 BC. It is regarded as a sacred plant by many tribes. Some cultures consider it a divine gift and believe that the smoke carries your thoughts up into heaven. The culture that most explicitly associated it with health and digestion was that of the Pueblam, a people contemporaneous with the Aztecs and curiously similar to them in many ways, but resident in South rather than Mesoamerica. Unfortunately, they are now extinct and nearly forgotten. As far as I know, the only existing book about them was written by Spanish explorer Felipe Inigo Carlos Tancredo Ignacio Teodosio Inocencio Orlando Urbano Salvador. There is one passage in the section dedicated to their beliefs and practices that stuck out to me and should stick out to you as well. Their god of health was also their god of tobacco and the god of organs, going by the name of Patixtli. His temple was a ziggurat or pyramid-like structure, where from either of the four sides you would ascend the stairs, and once on the grand platform at the top, smoke with the priest for as long as you had to, until your insides told you that you were ready to go a few feet further to the very middle of the platform where gaped a huge, well-like hole. Right there, you would sit down, imitating the pose of Patixli Klaklon Kakwalek, and relieve yourself. If any member of the Pueblam failed to let out at least one tiny brown drop after this ritual, which was to be performed twice a day by each member, they were cast out and had to live in the rainforest all by themselves, because constipation was considered a kind of infectious demonic sin. The priest himself would obviously smoke more than any other member of the tribe, and use the sacred communal lavatory at least a dozen times. For this reason, there were 7 priests who would alternate daily, since nobody could perform that duty for more than one day at a time. They were considered paragons of cleanliness and health. But you may wonder, coffee and tobacco were discovered by Europeans only around the 15th century during the Age of Discovery. How did they empty their bowels before? I am glad you asked, because there was one panacea that preceded them, the last, but certainly not the least of my solutions. You may remember that I already mentioned the Greek physician Hippocrates. His work was continued by one of his disciples called Laerton. At this time, faith in the gods was waning, and although the rituals for the Greek god of wine called Dionysus were still being performed, it took an expert in medicine to figure out that, spiritually significant or not, these rituals had a positive effect not only on one's mood but also on one's gut. I quote, "The fermented grape, whether drunk diluted with water or drunk undiluted, as is the habit of the Macedonians, lifts up the spirit and pushes down consumed matter." For a short time he went so far as to follow a purely grape-based diet, only red grapes and red wine, but he abandoned it after he woke up hungover one day, surrounded by what seemed like a bloodbath, only to realize he'd thrown up all over the place. I myself learned this at the age of 15, the very first time I got really drunk. Throughout the night, I was full of energy, and I felt the liquor lift up my spirit, as Laerton would have it. But the next morning, with a beating, excruciating headache, I went to the bathroom to urinate. And wouldn't you know it, I emptied not only my bladder. It required no effort on my part. I was focused on urinating, but all at once I released one huge stream of yellow-brown liquid. This is another important thing. Most of the time, if you follow my routine, your fecal matter will be quite soft. That is a good sign. The fact that everything sort of spills out of its own accord means you don't have to push, but can instead remain relaxed and store up your strength for later. As I said before, these stimulants, these tools for body and mind, are most effective in combination, so I suggest you combine them as much as possible. In my case, it looks like this. Throughout the day, I drink coffee and whatever alcohol I have available at home. In fact, most of my coffees are Irish, but I stopped drinking them after 4 p.m. so I don't have any trouble falling asleep. And to make falling asleep even easier, I double my alcohol intake at that very point. Works every time. I can almost never recall how and at what time I went to bed. You might be able to tell that it is already past 4 p.m. as I am recording this. Also, for most of the time, thanks to the constantly burnt tobacco, a kind of semi-translucent fog permeates my apartment, which adds a certain cinematic feel to the place. Now, I can do this because I am unemployed. If you have a job, you might have to bring a flask to work. Whatever you do, try to make sure that you can actively feel that your body is engaged in digestion at all times. The faster everything you ate and drank is digested and ready for release, the better. You can even take advantage of this and go for very long bathroom breaks, which also allow you to recharge for a bit. The smell should make sure that nobody questions the necessity of all that time off. Of course, you want to avoid appearing drunk at work or being hungover, let alone throw up and waste precious nutrients. Whenever that happens, or seems about to happen, or worst of all, if all my proposed solutions do not work well enough and you still need more energy, there is always cocaine. That's all for today, folks. I hope you found this helpful and learned a lot, or at least a little. Like and share to spread the word and help people be more motivated again. Let me know in the comments if you followed my advice, and if so, how it's been going. Also, please subscribe, because I am planning on creating more educational and motivational videos. Anyway, thank you for watching.